So in this video, we're just going to create a login for our Chrome extension that piggybacks off of Spotify's OAuth2 endpoint. Now, technically, OAuth2 endpoints are not used for authentication systems. They're used for authorization systems. So later in the video, I'm going to show you two ways. Was it two ways? Yeah, two ways of creating a more secure login system using OAuth2 endpoints. And so when the user clicks on our extension icon, we click the sign in. We're greeted with Spotify's OAuth2 endpoint. We'll say an object is a@protonmail.com. Password. We'll log in. We agree. And now when I click this extension icon, we have the sign out page. So I sign out. Let's sign back in. It remembers my details. So all I need to do is agree or authorize. And let's sign out. So if this interests you at all, stick around. Let's begin. Okay, so let's start off by walking you through the Chrome extension. It's a very basic Chrome extension. So when the user clicks on the icon here, they're just going to have a pop-up page with a sign in button. When the user clicks that sign in button, which is this script right here, we're just going to send a message to the background saying login. Now, once they're signed in, if they click on that icon again, they're going to have this page here. Again, very simple, just a sign out button. When they click that, we'll run this script right here. Again, just send a message to the background to log out. So let's take a look at the background script. Close this, open this. And so we just have a variable to keep track of the user's login status. We have our listener. If they message the background with login, if the user signed in, we don't care. If they're not signed in, this is where the meat of the video is going to be. If they message to log out, we're just going to flip the user signed in status to false and redirect the user to the sign in screen, the popup.html, with a send response of success. So let's take a look at the manifest. Very basic manifest, name, description, version. We have our icons, manifest version, background script, options. We're not using the options page, but I'll just leave that. Default pop-up. And we need the identity permissions because we need to access the launch web auth flow, which is part of the identity API of Chrome. So again, just a basic manifest. Let's close this. Now, what should we do? How about this? How about we register our Chrome extension with the Spotify developer console? So go back here. So obviously you need a Spotify account. You go to developer.spotify.com/dashboard/applications. This takes you to their developer console dashboard. We're going to click the create an app. Let's name the app. Let's say, what are we going to say? Let's say Chrome extension. Let's say OAuth2. Can you do that? Let's see if we can put quotations in there. Authentication. We're just going to say testing OAuth2 auth. I understand. Create. So you can put the quotations. All right, so this is the client ID we're going to need. Let's go to edit settings. And we don't care about website. We care very much about the redirect URI. So that's going to redirect to our Chrome extension. So the URI is, you go to your Chrome //extensions page, copy this ID here. So Control-C, go back here. The redirect URI is going to be https:// the ID of your Chrome extension, and then chromiumapp.org. And I don't know if we need the slash. We'll put the slash there since they have the slash here. So we'll click the add. We'll save. So now that we have our Chrome extension registered with Spotify's developer console, let's just copy this for now. Control-C. Let's go back to the background.js and actually start coding this thing. So per the docs right here, and I'll have a link to these guys in the description, we're going to use the implicit grant flow. So we're going to ping a certain URL right here with these parameters here. We're going to get back an access token. Let's start creating the endpoint. So we're going to need 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 attributes. So go back here. We'll start constructing them. So we're going to say const of, the first one is client ID. That's going to be equal to URL, encode URL, there, URI component. And we're going to need how many more? 5 more. I'll fast forward through this and then I'll explain what information we're putting in as the values. All right, so we have all of the variables set up. Let's do, and we're going to have to do something unique with this state later, but for now it's just going to be a const. So let's start filling these guys out. The client ID is that ID we got from the dashboard, this guy right here. So Control C that, paste this here. The response type per the docs is token. So we can go back here, write token. The redirect URI is the exact same one as this. So we can go to edit settings. Let's copy this. Paste that here. The state. Let's skip that for now. Scope. Let's tackle scope. So scope is what you want to. We're not going to go through that in this video. We're not dealing with accessing Spotify data of the user. We're just using their OAuth2 capabilities to create an authentication or a login system for our app. But if you wanted to access information on behalf of the user that signed in, you deal with scopes. Scopes are these guys right here. So given the access token, and if you request a certain scope, you can get the user read email, you can get private, you can get all these playlists, all this stuff, this data about the user. For this video, we'll just take this one here, just to say we did it. So we'll go back here, scope, there we go. And show dialog we'll set to true. That's just so every time the user clicks on the sign in button, we'll give them an opportunity to either sign in with the same account or flip to a different account. So save that. And for the state, let me copy and paste some code, and then I'll explain what the state is. All right, so what is state? Well, state is something unique to your app. If you didn't have a state, it'd be very easy to spoof your request to their endpoint. And so state has to do specifically with your app. You send a state with your request, and when they send you a response, they send you the exact same state back, so you can check that the request you sent and the response you got are part of the same transaction. And so you can set up your state however you want. For this video, I'm just saying meet and then a random string of numbers. Now, towards the end of the video, when we kind of secure the authentication process, I'll go through that with you. We're going to have to change the state, not on the fly, but per request. So it's not going to be a const, but for now, we're going to keep it at a const. So we have all of the query parameters set up. Let's create a function that ties all of this together. Basically a function that creates this right here. That's the endpoint. And then we're just going to append all of the query parameters to it. Let's go back here. Let's call this function, what should we call it? Say create Spotify, let's say endpoint. And say let's say it's an OAuth2, right? OAuth2 URL equal. And I'll fast forward through this part. I'm just going to copy this, the initial endpoint, control copy, control V, and I'm just going to append all of the query parameters. All right, so I've just created that request to their OAuth2 endpoint. Just appended the query string, so the question mark indicates we're starting a query string, and just client ID, response type, redirect URI, state, scope, show dialog. Just printed it out so we can see it in the console when we use it. So let's use it. So down here, if the user's not signed in, we're just going to use the identity API, specifically the method chrome.identity.launch web auth flow. Constructor, not a constructor, but it takes two arguments. First argument's a set of options in an object. So the URL is equal to the create Spotify endpoint, and the interactive will set to true. The second argument is a callback function that gets the redirect, we'll say URL from Spotify. That's how they give us the access token. Let me show you that. So down here, if there is a successful response, we get this string here, and we get the access token here, and then we get the token type, the bearer, and this state here. Later on in the video, we're going to check that this state is the same as the state we created, so we can create a more secure authentication system. And I'll tell you why we need that at the end of the video. So let's do two things here. So if this thing fails, this call to the API fails, Chrome's going to send an error. Let me just do this to keep the message line open. Let's do return true. That should be here. Chrome's going to send an error, so we're going to check for that. We're going to say if there is a chrome.runtime.last error, then we're just going to send a response of fail. So message, and that's that response, this send response goes to whoever called this login, which is going to be this popup.html. Send response to fail, else we know we got a valid redirect URL. Now, just because we got a redirect URL doesn't mean the user signed in successfully. And so if they don't sign in successfully, we're going to get this URL back with a callback error access denied. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy this. I'm going to go back here. I'm going to say if that redirect URL dot includes that string, then we know they didn't sign in properly. So we're just going to send a response of fail as well. Else, we know they signed in properly. So let me console.log the redirect URL, and then we're just going to dissect it. Save this. Let's go back to our extension. Let's do a refresh. No errors. Good. Let's do a split screen thing. This guy can go on the right. This guy can go on the left. There we go. So we sign in. So this is the URL we constructed. That's their authorized. It's way too small. Let's do this. Control 0. There we go. So we did the query to their account spotify.com/authorize and all of the data. And that's the meet string. So the string meet, and that's the random string of letters and numbers. So let's sign in actually. Let's do an object is a. All right, password. Remember me. Let's not do that for now. Agree. There we go. So this is the redirect URL. Let me do this so you guys can see all of it. Copy, close. Let's go back to the editor. So this is the redirect URL they sent us. And as you can see, the state is the same as the state we passed into the actual ping or the request. So I'm going to copy and paste some code, and that code is just going to extract this access token out of this string, all of this stuff here, all the way to there. So let me delete this, and let me copy and paste that code. All right, so I've copied and pasted some code. All it does is extract a substring out of the redirect URL, and that's the access token. I didn't write the code to extract the state yet. So let's just write it right now. Let's say state equal, how about this? Delete this, copy, paste. All right, so this is going to be the state. State's going to be equal to the redirect URL substring index of, and it's going to be state equals stat. And how many characters is that? It's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So this is going to be plus 6. And I think state is the last thing that shows up. So we don't need to do this line right here. Let's print these out and see if I got it correctly or correct. So access token, and we'll do console.log of the state. Save. Let's go back here. Let's refresh the extension. Let's sign in. Let's agree. And the state is meet. And the state is meet. Ends with N. Perfect. So we have the access token here, and we have the meet here. Let's go back here. Oh, there's an error, some sort of error. What's the error? Message port closed before response was received. Where is that? If user signed in, that should be. I see. We didn't send any sort of send response in this guy. Let me just send a response here. Let's go send response. And we'll say message of success. And since we're doing that, let's just copy this. So if they've successfully signed in, we're going to switch that page to the sign out page. So we don't need this here. Scroll up just a bit. This is going to be the pop-up already signed in.html and success. And we got the access token and state. So what we're going to do is we're going to check that the state we created, or state we got, excuse me, is the same as the state we created. But we want to kind of create this guy on the fly. So I'm going to take this guy out of here as a const and point it here. And we'll say right here, we'll say I'll do this just to indicate it's a variable, null, empty string. And so every time we ping or we create a request to their endpoint, we're going to create a unique state for our app. And it's going to save it in this variable. We'll go down here, we're just going to check. We're going to say if the state that came in is equal to the state that we created, then successful. And let's do this successful, else we'll do a send response of fail. And let me just do a console.log and see if that works. So console.log success. And let me delete the redirect URL, save, let's go back. And there's one more thing we need to do to program to kind of create a more secure authentication process. So let me go back, refresh, go here, sign in, let's agree, success, perfect. So that state mechanism works, which brings us to another way of securing or making a more secure authentication system. And I didn't explain why we need to do that. Let's do, what should I explain first? Let me just explain this first. So right now we're saving the access token within the scope of this function call. If you wanted to use the access token throughout your Chrome app, you would need to save it somewhere else, like where you save the state, something like let access underscore token equal that. And down here, instead of doing all of this, we'll change this to simply access token, redirect access token. This would be the access token, and this would be the access token. Now, why we need to secure this a lot more than we have is because of the way Spotify has set up their quote-unquote authentication system. It's not an actual authentication system. It's an authorization system. I'm not going to go into too much detail on the difference between OAuth. Let me see if I can get the page here. Yeah, I'm not going to go into too much detail about the difference between OAuth2 and OpenID, but just understand that right here, up here, Spotify doesn't use OpenID. It uses OAuth2. OAuth2 is not set up for authenticating users like this. And they say that right here. For information about user authentication, use or see the user authentication with OAuth2. This is the OpenID specs, or down here, OpenID specs. And so basically what we're doing is we're using OAuth2 to create an authentication system. OAuth2 is not meant to do that. An access token, just because you have an access token right here, it doesn't mean that the user is properly or legitimately that user. There's a lot of things that could go wrong. So down here, not there, up here, right here. There's a lot of things that could go wrong when you're using OAuth2 as an authentication token. Pitfalls, access tokens as proof of authentication. Here we go, injection of access tokens, lack of audience restriction, invalid. There's a lot of things that could go wrong. So what we're going to do is Spotify only allows us to use OAuth2. We're going to kind of secure this on our end. One of those ways is to use that state that we did. So we're sure that the response we got came from the request we sent. The other way is we're going to dump the token every 60 minutes just to make sure that the user who's interacting with our app is the initial user of the token, just to kind of not refresh, because there's another process of refreshing a token, but just to keep the user engaged with the app and not have a stale token floating around our app. Even though, like, let's say I did this, I went to my Spotify right here. Let's go to Spotify developers. Now let's just go to my Spotify account. Spotify. Let's go down here, apps. And so let's say me as a user, not as the person writing this program, but me as a user, I removed access for the program to use my access token, my credentials. Just because I remove access on the website, they don't send a message to your app saying, hey, the user removed access. Could you please not use their access token anymore? So for that purposes, we're just going to build some sort of, let's say, redundancy, but we're just going to dump the token every 60 minutes just in case the user removed access and we want them to re-engage with the app. So we'll do that here, state success, right here. And I forgot to sign the user into our app like this. We'll say user signed in is equal to true. And we'll do it right here. Just going to set an interval. So set interval there. We're going to set it for 60 minutes. 60 minutes is 3,600,000 milliseconds. And all we're going to do is access token is equal to dump the token. and sign the user out. So the user is going to be forced to sign in every 60 minutes. Chances of them being in your Chrome app for 60 minutes, I don't know. But just to create a fail-safe here, user signed in is equal to false. There we go, set interval, and we'll do we need an interval ID. So we'll interval underscore ID. Why do we need an interval? This shouldn't be intervals, excuse me. It should be set timeout. 60 minutes, sign the user out, dump the access token, looks good. So let's just go over that one more time. We have all of the information we need to send to Spotify's OAuth2 endpoint. We have a unique state being created. We send the request down here with launch web auth flow. If there's an error, fail. If there is an access denied, fail. We get the access token, we get the state. We check that the state of the response is the state of the request. If true, then we sign them in. We set our timer for 60 minutes, which dumps the token and signs the user out. And then we redirect the user. Let's see if this works. Let's go back here, refresh. Let's go side by side. In the background, there we go. Let's go sign in. I'll get rid of that console.log later. Agree, we're signed in. Let's sign out. We're signed out, no errors. Let's sign back in. Sign in. Agree, and success, we're signed in. All right, so that's going to do it for this video. Leave a like, subscribe if you haven't already subscribed, and I will see you guys in the next one.